If you're here, you probably already know that Shambhala art is a process, a product, and an educational program. In fact, we could say that the next 5 days is really an exploration of what is Shambhala art. Once Michael Govan was asked in an interview when he was at the Dia Beacon, which is a wonderful museum of contemporary art in upper state New York, as they were looking at a John Chamberlain sculpture, which looks like a pile of junk, literally is a pile of junk. Okay. And the person said, well, is that art? So his response was, well, really what it is for the search for what art is. So rather than trying to come up with the answer to what art is or what Shambhala art is, this is really about the exploration of what Shambhala art is and what art is, and what our creative process is, and may not have an absolute answer, but it is our search and our path. There's a quote that I like from the founder of this, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and that about what Shambhala art or Dharma art is about, and it's about seeing the truth of things as they are. So much of what we're going to be doing today and throughout this program is trying to perceive the truth of things as they are. It's also important to understand that we do spend a bit of time, there won't be a lot of long talks and things like that, but we are trying to establish a view. It's been said that our view is like our eyes, and our practice is our legs. And if we lose the view, we stop. So it's very important to understand, sometime today you'll get meditation instruction. If you haven't already had it, you'll get it new, and if you already have a practice, we'll ask you to, at least for the time being, to do the practice that we give you. But my view has always been of the view, is that if you give someone meditation instruction without establishing a view, it's a little like asking someone to sit on a park bench and then you leave and you never come back. Okay. So I want to emphasize that. The other thing I'd like to give you is some advice to how to work with this material. We could say that there's two types of people. We know there's more than that. But we could say, for the sake of this comment, this advice I'm going to give you, is there's two types of people. Those who are very intellectual and very critical in their thinking and reasoning, which is quite wonderful, and maybe don't entirely trust their intuitive selves so much. And there are those people who are very intuitive and are really suspicious of people who think too much. Okay. We all tend to lean in one side or the other. You know what I'm talking about. What I ask you to do for these next 5 days is lean into your weakness. If you are a person who's very intellectual and very thoughtful, to let go. Try to feel, as I'm about to talk a little bit about thoughts, sense, and felt sense. Lean into your felt sense. Okay. If you're a person who's very intuitive, we want you to try to develop some critical thinking. As it turns out, we really need both halves of our brain. Okay? We can't kind of limp along with one over the other and entirely get this material. So, you know which one your job is these next 5 days, and you want to work with that. We're looking for balance. You can think of it simply as that. There are 3 themes that we run through this program, that may help you also in terms of your felt or thought sense. One of them is perceiving things as they are. I'll talk about that in a moment. The other is felt sense and thought sense. And the last one has to do with expression, self-expression versus pure expression. So I want to establish that view now. Perceiving things as they are. Is there anyone here, by the way, who's never heard that term before?
Which term?
Perceiving things as they are. Okay? Would anyone here be willing to just for a moment say what they think perceiving things as they are means? By the way, we have other Shambhala art teachers. They should feel free to express themselves.
So we're not talking molecular.
I'm sorry?
We're not talking molecular.
Maybe. What would you say, Miriam?
So normally we operate in a very functional way with things, so we see them as we want them to be, or as we might use them. For instance, like a table is there for me to put things on,
Right.
as opposed to what it might be expressing, which might be something that I'm not able to see if I'm using what I want out of it.
Right. Part of it is, are we, when we observe things, are we seeing our projections, or maybe what's there? If it's possible to perceive what's there. So is it our ideas about things, or are we perceiving the things themselves? As we'll learn, and we hope to encourage you, is that meditation is a process by which we can hopefully get closer to perceiving things as they are, so that we can work with them as they are. One of the things that comes up in perceiving things as they are is this notion of thought sense and felt sense. We're really talking about right and left brain here, but rather than get into a lot of cognitive science, most of us understand what that means. We've all been in a situation, for example, where someone's walked into the room and we have immediate reaction to it. We don't know anything. There's some felt sense, some gut level sense. In fact, what's really happening when you have a gut level sense is that all your senses, for the most part, are working and informing you in some way. And then out of that, often occurs a thought sense, where you start trying to reason what your felt sense is about. One of the reasons that we want to talk about thought sense and felt sense, actually I have this really good quote I almost bypassed here. Paul Klee, hopefully a number of you know that artist, Paul Klee. One eye sees and the other feels. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Felt sense and thought sense. Right brain and left brain when we talk about that. So we're going to explore that. That's going to come up over and over again when we talk about our exercise. That's why we do so much in this program and engage so much, because we want to get to that felt sense and explore that, because most of our educational system seems to stress the thought sense and absence of the felt sense, and that's something we need to bring balance back to. It's not that your thought sense is in any way less or inferior to your felt sense. It's just that it needs that balance to be informed, properly informed, for the totality of your experience. So then we have self-expression versus pure expression. There's basically two types of expression. They're actually both self-expression, but one is self-conscious expression, and the other is not. In other words, I am going to make this piece of art. This is going to be really cool. My mother's going to like it. My dealer's going to like it. I feel great about it. I'm going to see myself in it. I'm going to learn about myself, and it's all about me, 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 me. Now, this actually, I'm not trying to say there's anything at all wrong with that. It's actually an important form of doing it. Doing art, learning art, exploring yourself, and so forth. However, there is another type of expression for which is not self-conscious, where you're not constantly referring back to yourself. You're not caught up in your self-dialoguing. It's unconditional expression that does not come from self or other. It manifests out of nowhere, like mushrooms in a meadow, like hailstones, like thunder showers. So that's kind of what we're working with. And that's also self-expression. You're just not self-conscious. And part of that is that you're also liberated from hesitation, because you're not watching yourself doing what you're doing. As it turns out, our conscious brain, if you do any reading like I do in cognitive studies, is actually a very small part of what's going on. It's been described a little bit like a gigantic corporation, maybe like GE, where the head of it really has no idea what anyone does in the laboratory or development or anything. Okay, they only know the general direction of where things are going, and that's pretty much what's going on with our conscious mind. And we're just trying to see that perspective so that we can relax enough to allow something else to occur, some space for something else to happen. It's been said that we take in about 11 billion bits of information every second, of which only 200 rise to the level of consciousness. So in some sense, I can't say this scientifically, we're hoping by the end of these 5 days that maybe we can get to 250. Okay. So with that, I just want to check with my cohorts here if would like to add anything at this point before we actually begin part one. This is our overall introduction. Would you like to say anything?
I would, Stephen. Thank you. First, welcome everybody. Is this good going?
Good.
Welcome. I have probably not met most of you, and so I look forward to making a relationship with you. I had one thought on one of the quote that Stephen just gave from Chogyam Trungpa.
Go ahead. I'll just fix you.
Oh.
You just go ahead.
And if you recall the quote, he talked about how things arise like mushrooms in a meadow, or they come from the sky as hailstorms. And then there was one more thing that came from the sky. What was it?
Thunder showers.
There we go. Thank you, dear. What flashed in my mind is that what he was giving us with that quote was the non-self-conscious expression can either be very gentle and soft, or can actually be quite strong and shocking. And so self-expression, if you're going to put all this business in the art world, can be what is important in the moment, and not to be afraid of that. That's it.
This is part one, which the theme is coming to your senses. Hopefully you've gotten your reading list and been working on that. So today's very much about grounding ourselves in our own experience and what you'll probably be reading, square one. We often arrive to what we refer to as square one by accident. We're trying to actually make this part of your discipline so that you try to arrive at square one. So much of our creative I work with a number of people, sometimes doing creative counseling, and often we have some personal way of trying to do what I refer to as finding a place to land. Okay. Some people run out and get coffee. Some people read the newspaper. I know one film writer who would circumnavigate their computer. Of course, there are people who take drugs, who do all kinds of extraordinary things to get to that place. The secret up front that we're going to give away right now is that if you develop a contemplative practice, it's pretty easy to get there. Okay, the hard part is developing that practice and keeping that practice. That's what works. So we're going to be about learning about square one and how to return to it. And that we also want, it's very important that you keep in mind that this is about discovery rather than projection. I think we all deep down inside know when we're projecting as opposed to discovering. So keep that in mind. So we're going to try to discover things by doing these exercises. You'll often find in doing the exercise, though, that you're going to start thinking about what you think the point of the exercise is. I can assure you that in most cases you will not know what that point is. So you can do it if you want, but most of the time you won't know. So you can relax and stop trying to figure it out. Okay. And if you don't know, we will tell you at the end of the exercise.